Well, first, my name is Hersy Jones Jr., and I'm running for sheriff because I am fed up with crime. I have been in this community. I moved back here in 1988 from New York City, and I practiced tax law there. Moved back. I got involved in politics in the community, and I think since I've been here, I've been hearing the same responses to why we can't do anything about our crime rate. Either we got not enough men, or we don't have enough, they're not being paid enough. But other cities have been able to do things, but it seems like in Caddo Parish, Shreveport, it just keeps going up and up, and I'm fed up with it. I've gotten involved out in the community. I've talked to chiefs of police. I've talked to other people who have been community activists, and then they get the same responses. They say they get the same responses from law enforcement that I'm getting, and I think something can be done, and I like to do that. Now, you said, what's my background? You know, I used to say I don't have a background in law enforcement, and then I realized my elementary school principal, Dr. Beckin, died the other day, and they had his funeral. And as I was thinking about him, I remember he named me co-captain of safety patrol in the 6th grade. And I said, hey, I got a background in law enforcement. But seriously, I'm a Harvard-trained lawyer, and I think that prepares you for this position. This position is more than about crime, and it's more than about the jail. It collects taxes, it oversees the service of process for the courts, and I'm prepared for that. And as a lawyer, you know, I actually enforced the constitutional rights of citizens because we sued law enforcement and companies that violated the rights of citizens. And when they violated those rights, then the way the system is set up, if somebody steals your car, you know, the police will come get you, but if they violate your constitutional rights, then you come get a civil rights lawyer like myself, and when I practiced, that's what I did. So I have an intolerance for people breaking the law, and I have an intolerance for this notion that criminals can be brazen, and they can just shoot shots. I moved from Elevator to Cedar Grove, and they can just shoot shots in the neighborhood, and people can't sleep, can't have a safe place to stay, and nothing is done about it. Well, let me address it this way. First, the Louisiana Constitution, Article 5, Section 27, says the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer for the parish. And it got some exceptions, and some say the sheriff is just responsible for the areas outside of the city of Shreveport. And I think it should be viewed a little differently, though. It's a team. You know, it's a team, and law enforcement and safety affects all of us. And a high crime rate in Shreveport is going to keep businesses from coming to the whole parish. So this, not my job, pass it off, to me, that's why I'm running, because I'm fed up with that. It's a team. When I played football at Captain Shreve, I played defensive back eventually under Coach Hedges. And as a defensive back, everybody had an area. But the main thing that Coach Reeves and Coach Hedges would remind us is a team. And just because you take care of your area, look and see if somebody else needs help. Because a touchdown scored against the other side is a touchdown against the team. So I think you got to have a team approach, and you got to have a caring approach and a creative approach. I just think you got to be smarter. You know, criminals are not as dumb as they used to be, and they're bolder. And I think law enforcement has to be bolder, and they have to be smarter. So in terms of, you don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I think if and I know that as sheriff, if deputies are available, then they should be able to assist. Now, the sheriff also has auxiliary deputies. And I worked with the Cedar Grove Neighborhood Association. We used to talk to the police and talk to the sheriff. Say, look, send us the auxiliary deputies. They don't have to have a gun. As long as they got a car and they got their uniform, the criminal will not know the difference. So you don't have to go put them through all the training. We just need a response. We need a presence. My experience has been, if you don't do that, then the criminal is just going to get bolder and bolder. And that's what infuriates me. To me, the single most challenging issue faced in our community is the disrespect for life. And I know some people may get upset with this, but let me just tell you, the Bible says thou shalt not kill. And people have different interpretations on that. But in this area, this notion of carrying guns, everybody's got to have a gun. Everybody's got to shoot the gun, and everybody's got to use the gun to resolve the problem. I think that culture is the number one issue. And as I always say, that as a chief law enforcement officer, it's kind of like a parent in a home. The police cannot be disrespecting life as they are applying the law and then turn around and ask the public to respect life. You know, they're going to do what they see the leaders do. And if they think if people say, I'm trained to shoot to kill, I know I can shoot them in the leg, but if I got a chance to kill them, I'm gonna kill them. Well, then the people hearing that in the community feel like, well, they offend me, I'm gonna shoot to kill too. And I think that culture, this just lack of respect for life, to me is a number one issue. Well, that's an interesting question because the federal government came in town and targeted a local business for shipping too much, of this medication, and the sheriff's office was silent on it. And I would have thought the sheriff's office would have been involved with that too, because that's putting the drugs on the street. And that's a drug that's going to impact the sheriff's office just like marijuana, and in some cases more than marijuana and crack cocaine and meth. And so I would have thought the sheriff's office would have been involved to make sure, but I didn't see the sheriff's office involved anywhere. But here's what's going to happen. The sheriff's deputies will come in contact with people as they find them. If those people are on meth, they're on over-medicated with prescription drugs, if they're addicted to it, then those deputies have to be prepared for that. So that means you're going to have more sensitivity training, because what may look like a criminal behavior may just be a behavior the person can't control because of the drugs. So you're going to have more training. You're going to have to train the deputies to be more sensitive. Now, I was commenting to somebody the other day on that. You're going to have to teach the deputies, make sure the deputies are happy. A deputy coming to work that's all tensed up is not going to be that patient. So what you're really asking for when you're talking about this situation and the condition of the citizens that the deputies come in contact with is they're going to have to take their time and they're going to have to be patient. They can't just treat everybody as if they're a criminal out to commit a criminal act. So I think training and sensitivity is going to be the major thing. And then you may have to put in some more healthcare training, because I saw a case over in Dallas where they just didn't respond properly, and the person ended up dead. And so the first thing you got to understand is deputies come in contact with citizens, and not all those citizens are criminals. And so you got to train the deputy and make sure the deputy is sensitive to the fact that this person may be acting in a criminal manner, but that doesn't necessarily make them a criminal. So take the time to assess, is there something else going on here? Well, that was one of the reasons that really motivated me to run, when I saw our sheriff's response to that. Now, Norway has the lowest recidivism rate in the world, and Norway has a program that they call Make the Inmate a Good Neighbor. Before I read about their program, my approach was treat the jail as a car wash and not as a junkyard. And what that means is when the inmates come in, clean them up, give them more training, assess them. If they've got mental issues, they've got psychological issues, treat those. They got to treat those. And when they come back out, then don't send them back out worse off than when they came in. And you send them off better off than when they came in, and then that says they're going to be less likely to come back. And then one of the other issues on recidivism, that's what this is about. See, recidivism, 19,000 years ago, I ran for mayor of Shreveport. I was 28. And I said, hey, look, you're going to have to do job training. You're going to have to teach people morals and values when you got them. You just can't treat them as I'm going to bring you in here and lock you up, and then when it's time to go, I kick you back out. We got to take an opportunity to take advantage of the intervention that we have. So people have come to realize, President Trump has come to realize, Senator Cassidy, the Republicans have come to realize that recidivism is the most effective crime fighting mechanism because it's so complicated. You can't go back and retrain at home. You can't redo the education. You can't redo the value system. That's difficult. But I say while they're up there in my jail, I got a captive audience and I got an opportunity to do a little bit more. So reform is the number one thing. I want to make Caddo lead the state and the nation on reform. Because I think, and then the money for it, it'll pay for itself. Now, let me just add one more thing with recidivism. What the stats show is that when inmates leave the jail with no money, they're going to commit a crime within a short period of time. So while they're up there in the work release program, right now the sheriff takes about 60-something% of the money. You need to give them more money, walking money, so when they walk out of that jail, they don't have an incentive to come knock somebody else in the head just to get a loaf of bread. Education is key. Years ago, when I was in college, we worked with a program called Students in Free Enterprise. And our goal was to teach the principles of free enterprise to everybody. We picked two groups. We picked boys' homes, and we got the sheriff of Orleans Parish to let us come into the jail and teach entrepreneurship to inmates. We won a national award for it. People loved it. You have to start early and let people know, the value system you want people to live by, you have to make sure they're taught. My dad had a phrase that I can't expect you to do better until I teach you better. And the Bible has a scripture to go with that. You train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. So but you have to do the training in the beginning. And you have to do it on the early end. So we know what value system we want them to have. You want them to be productive. You want them to go out and not steal and not shoot and not devalue life. So we've got to do that on the front end. So I'll support whatever the school system. I think you got to collaborate. The sheriff's office can collaborate. They used to have a thing called Scared Straight, where they bring you up to the jail and they'll lock you up and they'll leave you. And it was effective. But the ones that were the most effective when they made you think they had accidentally locked you in there. And then you realize, hey, wait a minute, this serious? Am I back here? Did they really leave me? So I know it's effective. So the sheriff, as a sheriff, the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer. So he's got to collaborate with everybody. They got to collaborate with the commission, got to collaborate with the police department, collaborate with the state police, collaborate with the federal, got to collaborate with the education, got to collaborate with the churches, you got to collaborate with the parents. And so I'm willing, and my background says I've done that. I'm willing to reach out and work with people because you've got to nip it in the bud while you control it on the back end. You know, I've looked at the budget for the sheriff, and I have an accounting degree. So I know when you're talking numbers, talking off the top of your head is just not what you can do. But I will say this. I've looked at the auxiliary deputies, and I think the sheriff can increase those. And when I worked with the Cedar Grove Neighborhood Association, our big issue was if I call and say somebody's shooting in my neighborhood, send me a car with some lights. Send me the cavalry. Don't tell me to look outside. One lady, they told her to look out there and tell me what type of car it is. She said, ma'am, I'm under my bed. What are you talking about? So, and then the chief told me just several weeks ago, we shorted. So no, you can't be short. Because if that criminal doesn't see the lights of the car, then they're gonna think nobody cares. Either they're gonna think the citizens don't care and they're gonna keep shooting, or they're gonna think law enforcement doesn't care and they're gonna keep shooting. So you got to have a response, and that response need not be a fully trained deputy. It could just be a car with lights, with an auxiliary, and we told them, look, you don't even have to do that. I'll come down there and put the uniform on, and I'll drive the car with the lights. Now, where does that come from? When I'm driving down I-49 doing more than the speed limit, if I see an SUV that I think is a police officer, I'm gonna slow down. So I figured the criminals are gonna be the same as I am. You gotta have a response, and what we've got now is virtually no response. So you gotta retrain that. And that sounds like a trick question. Now, as a sheriff, I collect the taxes. It's the parish commission and it's the school board. You know, they levy the taxes, and so I don't really see where the sheriff would weigh in on that because I'm just the collector. Now, it affects me because the jail is affected by ad valorem taxes. Okay, and so one main thing, if I were to weigh in on that, is jobs. You know, I want to make sure you're going to produce jobs and not just get tax savings. And I say it sounds like a trick question because, you know, in my prior life I was a tax lawyer, and at the job as a tax lawyer, and I hope my clients out there don't get upset with me, is make sure my clients pay the least amount of taxes as possible. Now, if they create the job, we're not really worried about that. We just want them to pay the least amount as possible. So I know that there are businesses that are going to have that approach to come in. And then one of the things you've noticed around the country, a lot of people have just said, tell these companies drop dead. We're not giving up our tax revenue. If you can't fund your own business, don't come here. But the main thing people are saying is that the community has to get the value for the buck. If we give up our tax revenue, you got to produce those jobs. And those jobs have to be produced from people within this parish. And a lot of things you found out that the parishes and the states have given up the revenue, but they hadn't had the back end mechanism to make sure that the jobs that are being created are filled by the residents of the parish that gave up the tax revenue. If you're going to get that quid pro quo, you got to have a fairness in it. And so that's the approach I'll make sure that we get what we pay for. Again, that sounds like one of those trick questions. People don't know what to do until they know what to do. So somebody's got to tell them what to do. But I will approach the question, tell you one of the funniest stories in my life. I went to undergrad at Dillon University in New Orleans. And my first or second weekend there, they had a hurricane. And the hurricane was coming. Well, I'm from Shreveport. You know, we get tornadoes, but not. So I didn't really talk about prepare for the hurricane. So I went down to the K&B, and I went for the preparation stuff. You had flashlights, you had that. But the one thing that was going was the alcohol. And I was like, why was the alcohol be out? And they said, we're having a hurricane party. Well, I like, is that the way you prepare for a natural disaster? Well, education is key. First off, as that person, you've got to run PSAs to the public so people can get prepared. You know, some people have said, well, buy a lot of bottled water. Well, you know, bottled water is cheap for a reason, you know, because it has a short shelf life. So buying a lot of bottled water to sit in the garage when the plastic is going to bleach into the water, not really a good thing. Okay, so you got to make sure that the preparation that's given to the public is going to be preparation that the public can use. Because the public has to know that, like for instance, if you're going to have to evacuate, you need some extra money. Gas is expensive. Okay, you need extra clothes, you need things set. So it's really the PSAs from the sheriff's office to let people know what all you need to do. Now, the real thing here is kind of funny is people evacuate mostly into this area. Okay, so the thing is to prepare the public to be prepared to host, to be prepared to share. Because when people have to evacuate, the closer you are, the less hotel rooms. And then the further you got to drive, so you're spending more gas. And I've talked to people from New Orleans, and they said the reason why people don't evacuate is because people don't understand it's costly. And if you're on a fixed budget, a fixed income, if every time they say evacuate, you evacuate it, well, if that happened 2 times in a month, and it can happen, you'll be broke. So I think the main thing is that as a sheriff and as that person, you got to do educational programs and PSAs ahead of time so people can prepare and budget for it. The issues, yeah. As I've alluded to, one of the deputies for the sheriff's office is, very important. And to address the crime issue within our area, we're going to need collaboration. We need community involvement. And particularly in the African American community, that's where most of the crime is. Let's just put it on the table. That's where most of the crime is. And so you're going to need that community to engage with law enforcement. Regretfully, the history in this community is that's not been a good relationship. And so as the sheriff, you've got to recognize I can't fight the community one day and then come out the next day and say, work with me. That's just one of the things that's causing a hemorrhage in our fight against crime. And the community wants to fight against crime and they want something done about it, but they also don't want law enforcement coming out there violating their rights. And I think that's something that as a sheriff, I come to grips with. And so training the deputies to know that you can't break the law while you're enforcing the law. You can't arrest somebody for violating the rights of somebody else, and then you turn around and violate their rights. And to me, that causes a disrespect for law enforcement, and it definitely causes a lack of cooperation. And when you got that lack of cooperation, then you've got a problem. Then the next thing, just to add to that, is there is this notion that the sheriff is not responsible for the 100 square miles within the city of Shreveport. Well, that's where all the crime is. That's where most of the killings are. So we can't advocate that. That's what we need. And I don't want to overstep anybody's authority, but I think if the Constitution says the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer for the parish, that ought to mean some collaboration and some creativity. Maybe it means shared cost on the experts to see how can we get it done. But it ought to mean, it should not mean that's not my job. And I think that's the attitude that's going on now, that people are saying, not my job. I got the parish, it's low, okay? But I'm not responsible for the city, it's high. We got to get past that. We got to get past that, and I'm looking forward to working with all agencies. And look, the rural area would not be left out. My family were farmers, so I'm sensitive to rural areas, and I'm sensitive to the need to protect your cattle. You know, I'm sensitive to the need to protect equipment, and that's why the sheriff is doing that, because you got a lot of that going on.